All right, we're rolling. Okay. So thank you everybody for coming tonight. This is the first of a four-part series on the informed client. The title is boring and pretty flat, but I think it does kind of encompass what I'm trying to get across with this whole series. Um, Working in physical therapy and working as a strength coach, you start to become really aware of sometimes the disconnect that there is when it comes to understanding the uncertainty of training, um, and the unpredictability of it. We get sold or informed via the internet and TV that everything should be this very clean process, and it ends up actually not being that. And that's what leads to a lot of frustration when it comes to people's progress, whether it be getting stronger, getting leaner, or whatever it may be, just getting healthier. So that's why I kind of put this together. The first one, this is the most complex one, and I thought maybe I should make it simpler and then threw that out the window. Mainly because I want everybody to embrace how uncertain this is and how much we just don't know about the process when it comes to predicting where you're going to be a month from now, 6 months from now, and a year from now, even though people try to tell you they can do that. So that's what we're trying to foster here. I'm kind of a free form presenter, so if you have a burning question, please raise your hand. I'm going to take myself off track plenty. So, and Amy can tell you that pretty clearly. So please ask the question. We will have a question to answer at the end when everybody's thoroughly confused, and we'll kind of go from there. Okay. So today we're going to go over movement theory and motor learning concepts. Okay. This is the meat of the entire presentation, and this is the basic fundamentals that I want everybody to understand so that we can build off those fundamentals to create what will be your new outlook on training. If we can get this stuff down, or at least have a general understanding of what I'm going to say up here, then it makes the rest of the process easier, and it's a great foundation that you can not only judge your own training off of, but anything that's sold to you or marketed to you or you see on the internet or the great abyss that is Facebook. So today, the main goal that I have, the objectives that I have, is to create a common language between everybody and the coaches here and the strength coaches and strength athletes, the KFS members and people coming in off the street, to understand that there is no good or bad. There is no mine versus yours. There is no one system that is greater than another. They're all based, or should be based, off of general fundamental principles that dictate training. And then to just kind of understand fundamental human movement requirements for performance and for motor learning. The description of the actual course had a little hook about learning how to walk and learning how to crawl. We all fell down quite a bit during that process, and the falling down is actually what teaches you how to walk. You don't just start walking, right? Your kids fall. If you catch them, and we know this from child developmental psychology, if you catch them frequently, it takes them longer to learn how to walk. So failure is kind of a part of this process, and we'll kind of go over that. The overarching theme to the entire thing is this really important term called self-efficacy. I will harp on this every single time. It's a buzzword in PT right now. It's a buzzword in training right now. And basically what self-efficacy means is that you are self-effective. Okay? That there's plenty of statistics that you can see right here. But the biggest thing is individuals who have high self-efficacy will exert sufficient effort, if well executed, leads to successful outcomes, whereas those with low self-efficacy are likely to cease effort early and often. Okay? I've told my athletes on multiple occasions, you need to be partly in the driver's seat. As a coach, I'm there to help course correct and help build the process, but you're in the driver's seat, right? And you have to do that. You have to understand some of these things and some of the things that makes this process difficult. And when you can do that, that's when you can create self-efficacy. The education is what creates that foundation. That's what we're going for today. Again, I will harp on this 1,000 times. This is the key. If you take anything away, it's to be self-effective with your training from all this. Even if I thoroughly confuse you tonight, because I probably will, because for the presentation, had my head twisted up a little bit. Just a spoiler alert for any of you that have seen it. Some of this are excerpted slides from the coaching course that I'm going to be putting on here in August. I'm a member of Clinical Athlete, a physical therapy or a physical therapy / performance group. And I'll be doing all of their powerlifting coaching certifications. So some of this stuff is a bit of a snippet from that. So the first thing that I want to get across when it comes to foundational movement are the two buzzwords you hear most frequently, which is mobility and stability. So a lot of the times, mobility gets demonized that, oh, I can't do something because I lack the mobility, or I'm not flexible enough, or my hamstrings are tight, right? Those are really common narratives that we hear pretty often. And then the other thing you hear is, oh, well, you can't do that because you're not strong enough. There's a weakness somewhere, right? The problem is we view these two things as mutually exclusive, as if mobility and stability exist at different places. They actually come together to form what it is that you do, right? And having proper mobility and stability together is what creates total movement. So when we sit here and we demonize some of these things and we say, well, you lack this, you lack that, it actually decreases your self-efficacy because now you feel as though you have a problem. 9 times out of 10, you don't have a problem. You just haven't done the things we're asking you to do enough to build some of the stability and mobility within the actual movement. Okay? So this is Sean Noriega. He's one of the best bench pressers in the world. Obviously, a lot of people wouldn't say that he lacks mobility. Pretty much anywhere. He puts his shoulders on the bench in roughly that same position and then bench. Okay? The problem with mobility is it's a little bit nebulous. We say mobility and it's kind of a buzzword, but nobody really knows what it means, right? It's not just flexibility. It's your ability to get into and maintain positions, right? So if you cannot touch your toes, a lot of people say, oh, your hamstrings are tight. Well, your hamstrings might not be tight at all. I might be able to take your leg and put it straight up in the air and you'll be fine. You're not able to get into and control that position. That's actual true mobility. Okay? And that's what makes it a little bit different. It's your total movement potential. And sometimes that's regulated by your brain. And sometimes it's regulated by external structures. And that's what makes it so nebulous. Is we blame a hamstring. We blame a tight structure. When actually it's your brain going, you're not really ready for that. And we'll get into why you're not ready for that yet in a second. The baby giraffe thing here is actually one of the reasons. A lot of the times when you come into the gym and you haven't done something before, you feel like a baby giraffe. It's just an awkward thing. That's a normal part of the process. I'm making you think of giraffes? That's good. They look funky, don't they? So that's when we start talking about the motor learning aspect of this in a second, that's where this baby giraffe thing comes from, right? You've got a lack of control when it comes to these new ranges of motion we're asking you to get through. So you feel kind of like a fish out of water or like a baby giraffe kind of wobbling out, okay? Stability. So this is much more defined, especially within the literature. It's the ability to offset an external perturbation. Ooh, it's a sciencey word. So basically, it's your ability to resist an external force, right? To stabilize against a particular force. Now, that could be your own balance. That could be an external load. That could be somebody pushing you. That could be the wind, right? But it's your ability to actually fight that force that's pushing on you. Inverse rate of divergence from the intended trajectory after a perturbation. Oh, now we're starting to get really crazy, okay? Basically, what stability is your ability to resist external forces and stay in the same position. To lock in, okay? So, stability or a lack thereof comes from many factors as well, not just the strength issue. So that's the one that always gets blamed, right? Well, you're not strong enough. It might not be that you're not strong enough. It might be that you're not used to actually being in that position at all. A lot of the stuff we'll talk about when it comes to motor learning, once we get past this foundation building right here, is understanding that reps stack up on top of each other and you learn positions as you get used to being in them. So a lot of the times you'll say, oh, well, I have weak glutes, so I don't deadlift well. Maybe it's just the fact that it's your third time deadlift, right? I don't swing a bell as heavy as the person next to me because my hamstrings or my hands aren't strong enough to hold the bell. It's quite possible it's just because they've been swinging 500 swings for the last 3 months and it's your first time. You can't swing. Sorry. So a lot of the times, this stability will come in a bunch of different forms, whether it's dynamic or static. Static, think of a plank position. Dynamic, think of any type of explosive movement. But stability is an important key when it comes to the totality of movement. So they both come together to create performance. They're not mutually exclusive. You don't have one or the other. You have both. And they marry together to make what it is that is human movement. Combination of mobility and stability factors used to propel a body part in a desired direction or hold a desired position. It can be single or multi-joint. So if we're talking about some bodybuilding stuff, right? The very first time you do an overhead tricep extension, you might not know where that dumbbell is. That's only working off right here. If you do a squat the first time, ask any of them when I put them in a position they're not used to. Ask Heather right now. I've got her in a wide stance and she's used to being in here. She has no idea where half of her body is. So it just creates this instability just because of those multi-joint feedback that they can't understand. The brain. So this is the most important part, and we're going to go over some more advanced concepts towards the end of this. Your brain is the master and commander of everything, and it's the one thing everybody forgets about. Your brain controls everything that you do. It learns faster than you think it learns. It's 10 steps ahead of you pretty much at all times. And yeah, wait till we get to the later stuff. Your brain is one of the most advanced things on the planet. And it's a lot of the times what we should focus on when it comes to training. And it will help explain later on why you have ebbs and flows in training, why it's not predictable. Because your brain is subject to many other things. We've been sold a bill of goods that our body is mechanical. It's a machine, right? Where if I give you a program, then the outcome should be this. Unfortunately, that's just not the case because your brain is involved, right? Your brain is what makes you a person. And the whole person is what we're trying to train. Stress affects you. Sleep affects you. Nutrition affects you. Your mood about what you're about to do affects you. The level of buy-in that you have in the actual program affects you. Has anybody gotten a program that they didn't really like too much, so they didn't get much out of it? When you probably should have, because everybody else apparently does, right? You go, oh yeah, that worked for so-and-so. And you do it, but you're like, I don't want to be in the gym 5 days a week for 3 hours. What happens? Your brain downregulates everything because of your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. It controls everything. Posture. So this is where we get into the fun stuff. Okay. Posture is something we talked about the nervous system and things that people focus on, right? Posture is something that people focus on, and we'll talk about nocebo or negative thought processes, right? We're starting to find out that posture is, there's really no good or bad posture. And people focus on it continuously, right? What posture more is an input and output from what you're actually experiencing. And when it comes to training especially, what we want to focus on is not that there is a good or bad posture, but what postures are you in most frequently and prepared for, right? Where are you normally? So if you're training and you have a range of neutral positions, right, in the neck and in the low back, those ranges are all safe, and we want to stay within those ranges, right? Coming out of them doesn't necessarily mean you're going to explode like a lot of people will tell you. But we need to understand that we need to be in these positions relatively frequently to help build tolerance to these things so that the input and output from the brain makes things more efficient and then protection, right? So we're very fearful of coming out of good posture. There's really no such thing. So when we focus on things as small as posture, it diverts away from some of the things we should be focusing on, which is effort. We'll get to that in a second. So the last two, balance and proprioception. So everybody thinks I've got bad balance. Most of the time, it's actually a proprioceptive issue. Balance is just your ability. It's the voluntary reflexive control, right? It's of a single joint or something like that. Proprioception is your ability to actually understand where you are in space relative to other things. Proprioception is the big guy, right? It's all the inputs together. Balance is just one particular little thing, all right? So a lot of times people say, oh, I have bad balance. Not only do they have bad balance, but they don't reach accurately towards things, right? You have them do a DUI test and they miss and poke themselves in the eye. Okay, that's proprioception. That's what's typically going on. The last one, it is Jones. The last one is motor control. So this is the last thing we're going to kind of talk about with this stuff. Motor control is taking all those inputs together and creating an actual movement pattern. Okay, this is all of it put together. So when you take the proprioceptive inputs, your mobility and stability inputs, and you all put it into the brain, and your brain finally decides to move, motor control is what the final piece coming out is, okay? This will change. That thing organizes, describes how the nervous system organizes sensory input and coordination of muscles for desired movement. Organizes is the key word here, because later on we'll talk about self-organization, all right? But that's taken all that input and all that data that we just did and organizes it into one big plot, okay? Something as simple as a squat. Thank you. This is all the things that go into something simple like a squat or a bench or a carry, okay? So this is the thing. Motor skill and motor skill acquisition. This is the meat of what we want to talk about, all right? Motor skill is a learned sequence of movements that combine to produce a smooth, efficient action in order to master particular tasks. Motor skill acquisition is the process with which you learn how to do those things. It'd be great if, as a coach, I could tell somebody to go do a kettlebell snatch and they would just do it. Right? It's just not how it works. Just like learning how to walk. Motor skill acquisition takes repetition. And it takes failure, and it takes missing. When you are learning how to roll over as a baby, how many times do you miss? Right? You got to roll over? Nothing. I mean, I got a 7-month-old right over there that rolls over like crazy right now. It took her a while to figure that out. Because your body has to go, oh, that's not right. File that away somewhere else. And oh, that one felt good. Let's keep that. Right? It takes repetition. And it takes a level of focused repetition. That's where motor skill acquisition comes from. Your discipline matters. So repeated efforts develop motor skills. Missing reps equals missing time equals missing goals. So this is actually one of my favorite papers by Raceman. This was off of competitive athletes, not trainees in a gym. But basically, they found that completing 80% of planned training weeks per season made them 7 times more likely to reach their performance. So this is where when everybody hears harping on consistency and harping on focus and harping on getting to your workouts and finishing your reps, that's where that comes from. 80%. And a lot, hey, I mean, you missed 20%. That doesn't seem bad. If you actually looked at it over the course of the year, if you're supposed to, yes, that's your mommy in the clinic. But that's really important. And this is where I start talking about how every rep counts. Okay? So when you're in here warming up, if you're doing a Turkish get up with yoga block, that rep counts. Even if you're going to work up to a 16K belt, those rep counts, right? All of that goes towards your motor skill acquisition. All of those reps add up. Warm-up reps add up. If you're warming up on a squat and you're using a barbell, you got to focus on walking it out, putting it in the right place, and doing the same thing that you would do if you had a max load on your back. All those reps count towards motor skill acquisition. And that's the meat of kind of what we're talking about tonight. To understand that when you come in here, every repetition that you do is going to count. Whether it's an easy rep and it's not a whole lot of weight, which is really, really, really hard and you're fatigued, and you got to really focus on what you're doing. Those reps count. They don't always look pretty, but that's also part of the process. Okay? It can't always be perfect. I'll fix it for you here. When your daughter's in the front row seat, it's a larger distraction than you think it is. So this carries over into any sport, right? A barbell sport. Katie does jujitsu. When you roll, I mean, you're hitting stuff, whether you're warming up or you're in a live roll situation. That stuff all matters, right? And I think it's the next slide actually. So this is when Maslow's learning stages start to come into play, right? And we can talk about how accurate this actually is if you want to have a really down the rabbit hole discussion. But basically, the way it goes is unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know, right? So when you first come into the gym, you might start picking up a kettlebell or doing a deadlift, and you don't know that you're doing it not the best, but you're trying, right? And then you keep doing reps and you realize, wait, I don't think something's right here. Where you have a coach come up and tell you, hey, let's try something a little bit different. Okay, let's try this real quick. So now you know, but you don't know how to necessarily correct it, right? Conscious competence is when you know you're doing it right, but you have to think about it. That's where that focus comes in. To a point where after you've done so many reps, it's just unconscious. You swing a kettlebell like a pro. You throw an arm bar like a pro. You carry weights around like a pro. You hit a max deadlift like a professional, right? That's what matters. That's when you've reached that kind of peak. The fun part is you do sports like me that doesn't always really happen because the weight keeps getting heavier. So some of the things that you hear a lot when it comes to this stuff, just to recap a little bit, something just has to be weak. I'll add a few more exercises next time, right? This is where more isn't always better. We have limitations. So every rep counts, but you can't just start adding stuff willy-nilly. I need you to sit down. Okay? I'm not seeing the results I want, so I'm going to add 2 more days each week. Right? I'm just going to do more. It's been 3 weeks. Why haven't I gotten better? It's only been 3 weeks. Right? It's rushing the process. It's one of the things I call choking your training. People get really frustrated because they expect or have the expectation that something should be already here, when that process actually takes a lot longer than we would like it to. Behavioral psychologists say it takes up to 6 months to actually create a good habit. It's not 2 weeks, 6 months. So if we look at that, not just from a behavioral aspect, but also from a motor skill aspect, it can take you 6 months to actually be good at something when you're doing it at least 80% of the time that you should be doing it. That's when you put the whole thing together. So, it's good old MacGyver. I told you every rep counts, and I also told you more is not always better, because it would make sense that I said if every rep counts, that you should do reps all the time, right? Well, then we have fatigue. We have getting tired, right? We have, what's that? Because we're not machines. And this is where your brain comes in. And this is where the uncertainty of training comes in, and where things get difficult. If we were a machine, because we're adaptable, we're robust, the human body is capable of incredible things, right? But you can't just pile it on. You can't just add 2 days each week. You can't just do more and more and more and more and more. Research is emerging that supports that rep ranges and loads to be less impactful for hypertrophy than we thought. So a lot of the times when it comes to this doing more, you really just need to do more quality, right? And you have to put in substantial effort, because you can do more, but if your effort doesn't match, then it doesn't equate to what we're trying to get. Warm-ups matter, working sets matter, every rep matters, but there's only so much you can recover from. And that we'll talk about in another presentation, because recovery is a big deal, and it's pretty complex. But the big thing is it means that effort matters, because in that study where they showed that anywhere from 3 to 30 reps in a set, the equalizing factor was reps to failure, or proximity to failure, right? You don't want to go to complete failure, but you want to come really close. So if you do 3 reps or 30 reps and they come close to the same amount of effort, then you're going to be on the right track. So effort matters. You got to put high effort in every time you're in here, and focus on the reps that you're actually putting in. The things that create an issue are the brain stuff, expectations, right? What are your expectations when you come into the session? You can ask anybody that starts in a strength sport. They hit a big number one week, they come into the workout the next week, it's the same thing, and it's not the same number, and they're pissed off. Why didn't I get better? I don't know. Your body doesn't know. It just doesn't happen that way. You might have more stress. That expectation, you might have put more pressure on yourself and created a negative environment, right? Your previous experiences, 2 years ago, I had a back injury, okay? I've been fine for 22 months, and I'm just starting to hit my deadlift hard again because of that previous experience. So these things create a bit of a steamroll when it comes to fatigue, that when you come into a training session, you're going to have ups, you're going to have downs, you're going to have strings of days that are great and strings of days that are crap. The key is to come in and work as hard as you can, as many times as possible. Our understanding of fatigue and its impact on performance is incredibly limited. Incredibly limited. I can tell you, I have lifters that come in and they feel like a bag of crap, and they hit PRs and everything, and they set the world on fire. I've had days where I feel like I'm going to set the world on fire, and the bar almost crushes me to the floor. We've all had those days where we're super excited to get to the gym, and we get going, and it's just not there. And then there's days where we like drag ourselves into the gym, and it's the best workout we've had in months. It's just not predictable, and we don't understand why. So putting pressure on yourself to meet those expectations is unrealistic, because we don't actually understand how that works. What we do know is performance is unpredictable, and we should have an expectation that it should be. All right. So here comes the fun part. The advanced concepts that I was talking about, your brain being 10 steps ahead. So when we talked about motor learning before, this U-shaped curve, right, is what motor skill looks like, motor skill acquisition looks like in people. The far left side is the beginner. Okay, that's the level of degrees of freedom that they have. What a degree of freedom is how far they can get off ideal and still kind of operate. The problem is they look like a baby giraffe when they're trying to do that, right? It's not super efficient. They're not able to use high load. They're not able to do it with any real speed. It just kind of looks discombobulated, right? The bottom of a curve is the intermediate trainee. They're the people that have been here for a while. They do things really well, but they're kind of stiff. If you put them at an awkward angle or awkward position and you change something, they look like the baby giraffe all over again. Or they can't complete the task at hand with the same performance standard, right? So it's super easy for me to equate this to lifting and strength sports. But if I have somebody who's an intermediate squatter and they do high bar medium stance, and I have them do low bar wide stance, they're not going to be able to use the same weight. They're not going to be able to do it to the same speed, right? If we go from a single kettlebell swing and we move you out and have a double kettlebell swing, you're probably not going to be able to do it with the same speed or the same weight because you're just not proficient enough yet. And on the far right is what we would consider experts. Those individuals, it doesn't matter where you put them. They're so proficient, their degrees of freedom are so wide that they can do anything they want at the same performance standard. So a 500-pound squat to that person is a 500-pound squat. Wide stance, narrow stance, feet straight together, feet straight, feet out, high bar, low bar, they don't care. Tempo, it doesn't matter. They're any position you put them in, it works. And why is that? There's a concept called predictive processing. And that's what your brain is 10 steps ahead of you. Now, if anybody's watching me coach, I don't cue a lot during lifts because their brain's already made the decision of where it's going to go. Okay? When you're in the process of movement, your brain has already mapped the whole thing out. And there's no way out of that. There's no way out of that loop. There's no mental toughness. There's no way to overcome. Your brain has already said, this is how I'm going to try to do this. Now, it might fail, and then it's going to take that plan, it's going to scrap it. But it might pull off. And if it pulls off, it's going to try to do it again. That's what predictive processing is. Your brain, when you put a ball on your back, goes, okay, this is how I'm going to do it. You're going to go down, and it's either going to punish you or you're going to pull it off. Right? Where you see people shift back, and your brain goes, I'm not supposed to be here right now. And you finish, the next time, it's not going to be as back anymore because your brain's already started to map that stuff out. And that's where self-organization comes in. If you do reps enough and you put enough effort in and you do it consistently, you will begin to self-organize and become more proficient. And I know that's kind of a crazy concept to think, but your brain will organize itself over time. As long as you put in a good amount of effort, you're very, very consistent, and you focus on what you do in here during your warm-ups, during your working sets, during your conditioning, when you're super tired, all that stuff matters. And that is it. That's the last slide. Does anybody have any questions about the craziness that I just talked about for the last half?
So when I come in and you only let me lift one day, I'm not putting my maximum effort the other day. How is that
Okay, so there's a difference when I say maximum effort and coming in and frequency of lifting, right? So a deadlift is difficult to recover from, and that's what you're talking about, right? Is pulling off a deadlift. A deadlift is one of the most fatiguing lifts that we have. If you do it really frequently, it's not maximum effort.
Okay.
You see what I mean?
So I need maximum effort at what I'm set to do.
Yes. When we say this is what we're going to do, you need to put maximum. Well, yeah. But
I want to get
we can get you worn out. Don't worry about that.
Okay. right. I just want to be putting forth the max.
Maximum effort, and it's not intensity. It's not weight on the bar, right? It's maximum effort focusing on what you're trying to do right now.
Correct.
But and there is no.
Well, there is, because if there has to be.
The main key is your body's going to find that.
So I have more than
Everybody has more.
okay.
To add that, it's kind of like max effort on a given day, at a given time, given your circumstances, right?
What do you mean?
So my max effort for what if I come and I watch Game of Thrones last night and I play at 4 a.m. I come in and I'm having, I have great intention to hit my 80% that I'm going to hit that, this morning. I also didn't sleep enough the night before. So my max effort may or may not be that 80%, even if my intention was that 80%.
Exactly. And the 80% that I'm citing is the 80% just completing your workouts 80% of the time, or you're playing work 80% of the time. When it comes to that, and that's actually, my brain glossed over that real quick. That's why I use rate of perceived exertion, or RPE scales, a lot, especially with my lifters, because it allows them to be a little bit more autonomous with their actual lifting. Your max effort can change substantially. It might, so we use a 10-point scale, 10 being like the max. It's like it's super, super hard for you to finish, okay? I did a squat set back here that was a 10. I felt like my eyes were gonna pop out of my head. That could be 100 pounds one day, and it could be 80 pounds one day, and it could be 50 pounds one day. All those circumstances will change. It'll shift up and down. If we're talking about running, that could be an 8-minute mile pace one day, and a 7-minute mile pace one day, and a 12-minute mile pace one day. Those things fluctuate, and they're completely unpredictable. And one of the things that people do really frequently, and thank you, Katie, for bringing this up, is when they don't meet that previous standard of effort and equate it to that previous level of performance, they beat the crap out of themselves. And you shouldn't. It's just what you got today. You got to take what's there, right? It's kind of a theme over here now. Just take what's there. And it can fluctuate up and down depending on a lot of factors. Some factors we don't even know completely. You had a question? Oh, okay. Katie? Yes.
What is the dip of it? As I acquire more degrees of freedom, more ranges of ability to lift, like I use the squat example. If I'm progressing and going from here's your basic air squat, I've learned that I'm at the top. Is this where I'm also incorporating different foot stances, different bar locations, things like that? Why am I going down? Correctly.
To an extent, if you look at this as your levels of degrees of freedom, as you become an intermediate, you actually lose degrees of freedom because you get locked into a particular type of pattern.
More specialized.
You become more specialized in that intermediate phase. And then as you get more proficient in that particular range, then you're allowed to explore other ones and still be successful. So that's why it's a kind of an advanced concept. And we're still trying to figure it out quite a bit. Because if you look at professional athletes especially, they can get in some funky positions and still be really, really successful. Where a beginner would be able to do that, and an intermediate, they're not there yet because they can't get into and perform in those positions, right? So that's the kind of difference there.
So why do I want to lose degrees of freedom? Why can't I just have something?
You can't jump the chasm. You're unable to jump the chasm.
But it's the loss of degrees of freedom that allow you to change different inputs.
The loss of degrees of freedom is what creates rigidity within the system, right? So it solidifies your max level of performance in ideal situations, right? In the beginning, when you're a beginner up top, you don't have a performance standard and you're not able to attain a high level of performance because your degrees of freedom are so high, you can't act on what you're trying to act on.
So, like, when I first started lifting the Atlas stone,
my body would kind of feel whatever. I would move the ball and put it on something, but Lord only knows what I was actually doing in my body at that time. As I move forward, it's kind of robotic, and I can do it.
Yeah.
But it's only with a stone of a certain size.
Yes, exactly. You're very successful
Right.
within this very
That's
limited
very narrow range.
framework of performance.
And so as we creep towards this side of the curve, I can pick up heavier balls and not be as wibbly wobbly.
Yeah, and do them in different ways. Okay, you can take different grips. You can
Maybe it's not a smooth atlas though.
And that-
it's an awkward side.
lifting that for you, Barrett. Lifting natural stones is a great way to equate this, right? You might get really good at one of your stones, but the same weight stone that's shaped in a different manner will crush you sometimes. Yeah, at times. When you become very proficient in those things, it won't matter because the weight will be equated and you'll be strong enough, like so strong that you're just going to overcome many things. But you'll also be able to get in this different positions to accommodate to the actual implement and still be able to perform at the same standard, right? I always look at it from a squat. 500 here, 500 here, 500 straight up, 500 low bar, right?
Part of being able to squat 500 anywhere in your competition. Probably 650.
At times.
Making it easier to handle.
At times. There are guys that it's a 5% difference in stance change. I mean, Big Ray is in the upper 9s regardless of where his feet are or where the bar is. He misloaded 985 at Tyson's. Oops. Yeah. Oh, crap.
So I do have a question about the mental part of it that you mentioned, especially in the beginning. This curve is a great flat to end on. So especially in the beginning of that curve, you're kind of very in my head about how I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I guess this goes back to your every rep counts kind of thing. So you just have to train your brain to keep doing it in the right way. All right.
Yeah, it takes repetition. And you can look at this and you can start to, this isn't just motor skill learning, this is learning in general, right? You can look at this in regards to nutrition as well. When you start off with a new diet plan or you start off with a new type of eating plan or process, in the beginning, you go through a lot of bumps. You go through a couple failures. You miss a meal. You go to Chick-fil-A and get all the waffle fries. You fail a little bit. You fail in workouts the same way you would fail through a nutrition plan. And then when you get to the bottom, I noticed this with RP because that's what I'm the most proficient with. But when I was at the bottom, I was super rigid. I looked at the template and I just stuck with the template. And I did that really, really well. Any change in that, and I was like, all the waffle fries again, right? Now, at the top of the curve, I've got Mother's Day this weekend. I'm shifting things around. I know how I can move this over here. And you're a lot more open with it, and you still get the same outcomes. So you can look at this from a bunch of different perspectives when it comes to this U-shaped learning curve. Degrees of freedom happen in strength training, in performance training, in nutrition, in life, learning how to drive. Everybody remember, right? You're looking all over the place. Then you think you're hot stuff, but all you can do is hold the wheel like this when you're in high school, thinking you're cool. And now you just do your thing, right? Amy, do you have a question? Oh, another hot flash. So yeah, this stuff carries over to a bunch of different things, and nutrition is another subject where people get really frustrated because of failure. And the key for tonight, and I know a lot of this was difficult concepts, but the key to understand is failure is going to happen. It's a normal part of the process. We shouldn't get frustrated by it. We should understand that it's an inevitability and it will help us get better. But we can't get negative, because if we get negative, it decreases our self-efficacy. It makes it harder for us to continue to succeed. We take that lump, we learn from it, and we move forward, right? Your brain will inherently do part of that for you when it comes to motor skill acquisition. But just like every rep counts, every meal counts that you do successfully, that's a feather in your cap, right? Every week that you do that well, that's another feather in your cap. And if you do one wrong, it's gonna happen. Move on. Next, do it right the next time. So that's the big key with a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, is to decrease your frustration. So if you decrease your frustration, and a lot of this stuff will come much easier, and it'll make the whole process way more enjoyable. Way more enjoyable.
Are you saying, I mean, too much, when you say 80-20, but you should
No.
days a week?
So that's not the 80-20 rule.
Oh, okay.
That's not the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule is, I think, a different concept than what I presented here. The 80-20 rule is, you're disciplined 80% of the time and 20% of the time, where you got that, you got to live. And I do agree with the 80-20 rule. I think you can't, choke the life out of what the stuff you're trying to do. The 80% rule in this is that if you have 5 workouts planned this week, making 4 of them at least will help you towards your goal, right? And really, we want to look at this as a long-term thing, not just a weekly thing. We want to look at this 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, year intervals, right? Long-term. You want to make 80% of your yearly planned workouts, and you'll be 7 times more likely to be where you want to be. Anything less than that, it's just harder to get to, right? So 4 out of 5 times. Show up 4 out of 5 times.
So when you come in and you're tired, are you better off coming in and doing less weight but giving the same effort?
Yep.
For the class?
Yes, sir.
Or taking more weight and doing less effort?
But more effort. It's always effort.
Consistency is the whole key.
Consistency is the whole key.
Weight, because you're tired, you're doing it consistent, technique, sound, all that. That's important.
Precisely. And that's scaling back.
Don't stay home because you're tired.
Yeah, don't stay home because you're tired. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here right now. And I didn't even get to watch Game of Thrones last night. I'm a little bitter about that. I went to bed early. Thanks.
You might come in and I just love the workout. I don't have a goal.
That's fine. That's fine.
It's
And
just a big feeling to come in.
yeah, and the thing is a lot of people, you're unique is probably one of the things that I'll say. I enjoy the process of working out as well, right? If somebody were to take training away from me, like right now, I don't have a goal. I'm with you. I'm so bogged down with work and with projects and all that stuff. I don't have a meet. I don't have a goal. But I love to train. I love to come in here. In that particular instance, I would say that we are relatively unique because most people need that goal and they need that outcome. Yeah, it's the U-shaped curve.
When you start out, you don't really have goals, you don't have set. But you immediately latch on to something. You're like, I want to deadlift X number of pounds. And that's all you're aiming for until it doesn't happen. And then when you're on the other side, it's happening.
So goal setting to an extent is a little bit murkier waters, mainly because a lot of people are told they need to have a goal. They're just not good at actually committing to a goal. You know what I mean? The internet and media tell us, well, you're going to go to the gym, you need to have a goal. You don't really need to have a goal. It helps, right? It does.
So I'm thinking about intrinsic motivation.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like Diane has intrinsic motivation. She just, she's motivated by what she experiences here and, for her. And I was thinking about for me, because I don't really have a goal right now, except to not lose the strength I already have. I'm not competing right now, anything like that. So, but again, there's a kind of stuff. I don't know. There's something about that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, we can start talking about empowerment, and we're going to get like way into the weeds here. But just to kind of to draw back to what you were saying, 80% of the, I really feel like if it's linked to enjoyment, then if getting 80% of those workouts is going to help fulfill that enjoyment more than not coming. And that's just kind of at least the underlying theme for me.
One of the things I was talking about actually today was setting an intention. Like if you go to a yoga class, at the very beginning of your practice, you're going to think about why you're there at that moment, set your intention. And I think that doing that in when you show up at the gym comes in handy. Again, I do a lot of martial arts, so there's a little bit of art as well. But it allows me to work with people of different abilities, of different sizes, of different skill sets, whatever the case may be. Because I've set my intention. So my intention may be I'm going to, practice my arm bar and work at a securing position. Or in a lifting environment, my intention today is to not focus on the numbers on the barbell and to focus on, getting full hip extension, hit a triple extension every time I pick that barbell up. Whatever the case may be, but setting that intention for that given day. And I think it's like a mini instead, or like a mini focus. But even if I'm having a tired morning, I can still have a very successful session, regardless of whatever the numbers today or long term.
And I agree with that because that allows you to have a central focus of the effort.
And that, again, engages the brain, like you said. You're constantly thinking about that.
Yep.
Awesome.
One more question. In terms of self-esteem, some people really enjoy coming to the gym. Some people come with a lot of grit just inherently. Have any suggestions for encouraging positive reactions from, say, others that you're working with? How do you increase someone's self-esteem? Or how do you increase, how can you encourage that?
That is the magic question. When it comes to a lot of this stuff, it's a difficult thing, and I think positive environment is a key. That includes positive people and a positive mindset. Not to get all like positivity, yeah. It's decreasing boundaries for entry. When it comes to, so I always think in it's my world. So for strength sport, right? Everybody, when am I strong enough to compete? That's the super, super common question. When am I strong enough? Well, by asking that question, I can tell you your answer is going to be never. Because you're going to continue to move that goalpost. And it's knocking that down and saying, the barrier for entry is right now. You got to get out there. You got to do whatever it is that you can do and understand that you got to take what's there today and build on that for the next time. So when it comes to that barrier of entry, it depends on the environment itself. But sometimes just getting people to understand that it's okay to fall flat on your face. You're not going to get judged. It's not a problem. And fostering that kind of environment. It's actually really difficult to do if anybody hangs around social media. So those would be the biggest things for me is creating a fostering environment of self-efficacy and getting people to better understand that they're in the driver's seat and they're able to accomplish those kind of goals. The rest of it is up to the individual because we're still talking about individuals. So you have to ask questions. You have to probe. You have to understand their why. You have to understand their internal motivations, their external motivations, their previous experiences. All those things come together in self-efficacy, which is one of the reasons we talked about it in PT so much. It's because it's such a contributor to chronic pain that just by increasing somebody's self-efficacy, you get them out of pain. So it's the same thing with activity. it can get really complex when you start talking about the individual, because self-efficacy is a psychology term that professional psychologists use on a pretty regular basis. So it can get very personal very quickly. That sun is bright.
Yeah.
Anything else?
What about routine? Go ahead.
People don't realize when they're doing something well. They don't recognize they've done something well. They focus on not doing as well as the person next to them isn't really. So having them recognize what they've done definitely helps. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I believe there is healthy competition and unhealthy competition. And in that case, that's what I would consider unhealthy competition. People are also just inherently negative on their own accomplishments.
Well, it's misinformation too, like my situation. As well.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to do what someone else does, but until you understand that from your standpoint, to where I get that I shouldn't be looking over, why can't I do that?
Yeah. Well,
It's
misinformation.
in our brain.
Yeah, misinformation is incredibly difficult to contend against. I got an hour and a half long podcast where I felt like I said nothing on the topic of misinformation. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's decreasing comparisons. Again, a lot of it is a personal thing that you have to overcome, and celebrating small victories.
Exactly.
Celebrating small victories.
Focusing on what you can accomplish.
I think some people don't realize it's okay to celebrate small victories.
Right, that's,
That it doesn't have to be big victories.
right.
Well, they don't even see it as a victory
Yeah.
till they get it.
Oh, we've banned the word just.
Yeah, that's good.
It's not allowed. We need just or only. Yeah, we don't allow. Get out of here. But yeah, celebrating accomplishments is tough, and I find that to be really difficult there in the bottom of it. Is celebrating small victories. So, Barrett, you have one more thing?
You talked about motor skill acquisition, about motor skill education. How quickly do some sports taper off?
So this can get very complicated very quickly. But motor skill acquisition, you can see a decay in about 2 weeks. Yeah.
Because you talked about like don't just add 2 extra days per week and think that's consult. But there's also like a minimum
Effective dose.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
So somebody who comes in once every 3 months and wonders why they're not getting better. 10 years of once every 3 months is not as equivalent to somebody who's been in 3 times in 1 year, 3 times in a year.
Yeah.
Even if it's the same number of days.
Yeah, and that's, the biggest one for me that I see most frequently is injury. And we can start talking about correlating this degrees of freedom theory with learning theory after injury. The people on the far right side, the term riding, it's like riding a bike, that actually applies to them. You'll see a guy tear his ACL and his quad is huge because he's a football player. He goes through 6 months of rehab and his quad is just as huge. He's just right back at it. Not so much for the other two, right? You tend to see more difficulty. Obviously, there's confounding factors there. People get infections and, other things happen. But you can see people have an injury or take a hiatus. Andy Bolton is a great example. Andy's been a 1,000-pound puller for, the last 20 years. He's on dialysis. Is in acute kidney failure and still pulling in the 9s whenever he's able to get off dialysis. And he'll take 6 months off. So, when you have a high level of degree of freedom as an expert, that comes back very quickly. But we see motor degradation in about 2 weeks. And appreciable motor degradation, especially in things as simple as strength sports. So that's always fun. But it does come back very quickly. Anything else? Good?
Good to think about.
Thank you, Professor Black. We appreciate
Very
it.
good.
Welcome. So the next one is in 2 weeks,
Every 2 weeks.
every 2 weeks. And